Oh, cool. Look at everyone filtering through. This is great. I do now almost wish I had planned some elevator music. But as everyone can see, we are level 2, so we took the initiative to fly up to Wellington to meet with our panellists, and we're all in this cafe together with our coffee for the Kōrero Café. So if you've just joined us, grab a hot drink, buckle in, because we're about to have some great discussions around defining youth work in Aotearoa. So I will just open our Kōrero Café just with a quick karakia that I've been practicing, and then we'll introduce myself, run through a bit of what we're going to do today, and then our panellists will introduce themselves as well. Okay. Pou hihiri, pou rārama, pou o te whakaro, pou o te tangata, pou o te aroha, te pou e hiri nei a tātou, mauri ora ki a tātou, pou mea hui ka iki e. Kia ora. Awesome. So for those that don't know me, kia ora, my name is Taylor. Ko aura ki te maunga, ko waimakarere te awa, no kaipoi ahau, ko ngā tika hingunu te iwi, ko ngā tene waka te hapu, ko Tayla Taylor toku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Awesome to meet you all today. I was feeling a little bit nervous having this slot to host these who are always described to me as OGs in our sector. And if you're not sure who they are, I will hand over to them just to briefly introduce themselves. Tell us sort of who you are, where you're from. We'd love to know what it is you're doing now, and let us know someone who inspires you and why. I think that's always a great window into a little bit about you. Fiona, would you like to start?
Oh, I thought you were doing this alphabetically. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko paparawa nā pai maunga, te rū nei o taku nakau, ko kawatiri te awa, te mahia, nei aku maharahara, ko te tai o rihia, te moana, I whakamari e tuku wairura, no kawatiri ahau, Tira toku tira toku turanga waiwai ho, ko kati waiwai te iwi taki taki, ko Fiona ahau. So, yeah, I'm Dr. Fee, Fiona Beals, been in the sector for a long time, not as long as Lloyd, and hail from the mighty West Coast, and I currently work at WelTec and Whitireia as the Principal Lead, Teaching, Innovation and Research. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Nice to meet you, Fee. Thank you. And also just, yeah, anyone that's joining us today, feel free to introduce yourselves in the comments. It would be awesome to know who's here.
I forgot to say who inspired me, Taylor.
I thought maybe you were thinking you might wait till everyone finishes and wow us away at the end, but
I might do that.
Oh, sweet. We'll do a quick introduction, then we'll come back to that question. Lloyd, do you want to go next?
Atamari e tātou, kānui te mihi ki a koutou. A ko wai au, ko nā motu Shetland te tūranga waiwai o Okutupuna. Hei oi whakatangata ki Aotearoa. Ke te noho anga I te rohe potai o Ngāti Toa Rangatira, te upuko te ika. Really nice to be here. Thanks for your welcome, Taylor, and hi to my esteemed panellists and to everybody who's tuning in. I'm Lloyd Martin. I live in Porirua, in the mighty Porirua. We're allowed to be mighty as well. I'm involved in Praxis, which is a community of people who do youth work, and tell everybody else how to do it.
Awesome. And you're very good at telling other people how to do it. I went to one of your rap trainings earlier this year, thoroughly enjoyed myself. And we'll hear from you, Anaru.
Ko te pū, te more, te weu, te akaterea, ko te wānui, te kune, te whē, te kore, te pō. Ki ngā tangata Māori, ngā rangira wako papa, ko tēnei te timatanga o te ao, whiti whanau haramai te toke haumi e hui e tāi ki e. Ko wai au, ko Anaru Te Rangiwhakaewa tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei o rangitāne me taitanga māhaki, e noho iho au ki te karu o te ika, me Wairarapa, e mahi ana au ki te rōpū o Ara Taiohi me te rōpū o rangatahi to rangatira. So kia ora tātou, amazing to be here today with you all, to share kōrero, to share whakaro. So my name's Anaru, I whakapapa to Whitireia and to Taitanga Mahaki up on the East Coast. And I work for Ara Taiohi as the Kaitaki Kaupapa project lead, working in the space for our whānau Māori in a kaupapa called Ngā Kaihui. I also am a youth facilitator in my community here in Whitireia for a rangatahi rōpū called Rangatahi to Rangatira. And a person that has inspired me in the youth world or in the youth sector is probably Matua Marcus Akuhata Brown from the Tuia Kaupapa. And yeah, just his mahi is inspiring and amazing. Nō reira, mihi mahana ki a koutou.
Kia ora, thank you, phenomenal. You had some shout outs in the chat there, people saying hello. We'll hear from you, Lloyd. Who's someone that has inspired you? Oh, we've got the barista delivering your coffee in the cafe. Obviously, well, hi barista. We're obviously saying the same barista. Lloyd, who's someone that inspires you?
Yeah. If it's okay not to have a single person, I'm inspired by the next generation of Kai Rangatahi who are coming through. I think that it's one of the really nice things. You know, it's easy. There's two pathways you can go down when you get older. You can get old and grumpy, or you can get old and inspired. And I'm thankful to look around some of these people coming up on the chats and thinking, actually, I'm in your fan club. Kia ora.
Awesome, and that is the correct answer. Thank you. Fiona, I'll finish with you.
Well, that means I have to give the same answer. Someone who's really inspired me is Dame Fiona Cooper, who led the hikoi down from Northland to Wellington in the 1970s. And why she's inspired me was that she would go down and speak to generations and generations of people, and they would follow in her footsteps. And there's that famous picture of her and her mokopuna that you can still see on the web.
Brilliant, thank you. So before we get started, I just want to do a wee icebreaker. I had a chat with my team at VOYCE about this. Oh yeah, I'll share. Where I work, I'm from VOYCE Whakarongo Mai. I'm a kai whakamana down here in Ōtautahi. We cover the Te Waipounamu South Island region. I've been here for 2 years, had my 2-year anniversary while we're in lockdown. And I love it. It's awesome mahi, and I can see a lot of our VOYCE whānau in the chat as well. So thanks for coming, guys. But a wee icebreaker, I saw this meme on Facebook and I thought this would be awesome to share, and it's around what is your rapper name? And if you are in the comments, please participate. And so your rapper name is Lil, followed by what you had for dinner last night. So would love for people to share in the chat. What is your rapper name? What you had for dinner last night? And starting with Little. So for me, Little Spaghetti Bolognese is my rapper name. Who would like to go next? Yeah, Anaru.
So my rapper name, and I really like this one. As soon as I said it, I was like, man, I might actually take up a career in rapping. So my rap name will be Lil Snitchel. So I had beef snitchel for dinner.
I love, so I've got another little spag bowl. We must be cousins. Lloyd, Fiona, what's your rap name?
Little corned beef.
Little mashed potato like vampires in the house.
Little mashed potato. Oh, that's brilliant. We've got little chicken burg, little snitch. Oh no, that's you. Little silver side, little quesadilla. I like that one. Little pasta. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, everyone. That's great. Oh, that's great. Awesome. So so the reason we're here today is to discuss definitions of youth work, or defining youth work, which was the theme of the latest Kaiparahuarahi journal. And we're discussing today a little bit about you guys, but I love reading your articles so much, and have crafted a bunch of questions to ask you, sort of to touch on the crux of what each of your issues were about. But before we get into that, just to understand a little bit more about your journey and things like that, just a question for everyone, and we'll start with you, Anaru, is how did you get started in youth work?
Cool. Great pātai. So my journey to become a youth worker started when I was a rangatahi myself. And growing up in this small community, I went through many challenges of adversity, disconnection, and so much more, to a point where I found myself in Rimutaka prison after years and years of struggle and challenges. And I went through this journey of transformative change and self-healing through whakapapa, through te ao Māori, and understanding who I was as a person. And one of the things that I wanted to give back from my journey was these seeds that I had attained. And these seeds are what I've been planting in the lives of young people who have had shared and similar experiences to myself. And I think about all of the things that would have made me a better young person in my time, and I try to implement it in the way I work with young people today. And so that's how I got into youth work. And it's been an amazing, powerful and inspiring journey to connect with our rangatahi, to become a po for those that have no one to turn to, who have similar experiences to myself. So yeah, that's how I got into my mahi as a youth worker. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for sharing. Really inspiring, and I've loved getting to know you over the few times that we've met. Thank you for sharing. Awesome. Lloyd.
At 17, my parents' marriage fell apart spectacularly, and me and the other kids were in the firing line. And a guy whose name is Trevor Salisbury got alongside me and invited me to become part of a community that he was holding. And even though I wasn't ready to talk about what was going on inside, he let me do two things. He helped me get involved, and then he gave me responsibility. And I found that that was a healing thing for me, and it kind of didn't stop. So I trained as a primary school teacher, then moved out to Whitireia and never left. And then after a few years of teaching, kind of realized that my heart lay not in mathematics and English, but in helping young people with whatever they were going through. So that was kind of my start in my early 20s via teaching.
Awesome. And Fee, how did you get started in youth work?
It's a similar sort of story. Growing up in Westport, Kaiparahuarahi, it was a sole parent family, but going through quite a lot of abuse, and getting, as a very, very, very young person, and before I was even 10, getting into drugs and alcohol. And one day, I ended up at an event that was in town, and I was talking to a youth worker, and he wasn't from Westport, he was actually from Nelson. So I don't even know what his name was. And he asked me what I was into, and I said I was into music, big time, still am. And he gave me something that you're too young to know what they are, Taylor. It's called a cassette tape. It's when music used to put a cassette tape in a player, and the music would go from one little wheel to another little wheel, and you'd make mixtapes and give them to your friends. So he gave me a cassette tape, and it was a cassette tape that changed my life. The music on it was just absolutely positive and really spoke to my heart. And there was no turning back after that. Have to make a difference. And as I like to say, it's about now giving back to the sector, because the sector changed my life with a cassette tape.
I do know what a cassette tape is. My first cassette tape was the Venga Boys. It was my first and last cassette tape. And just riffing here, actually, we were going to jump into it, but I'd love to know, what was your first cassette tape?
My first cassette tape was Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. Shut to the heart.
Okay. Feel free to share in the chat team. I'm really interested. Lloyd, Anaru, before we start, what was your first cassette tape or record? Yeah, I don't know. Just throw it out there.
I'm not going to lie, my first cassette tape was my own one, when I thought I was a young OG making raps in my garage. So,
Little schnitzel.
a little snitchel in the house.
I don't want to say, because it's so embarrassing to say, that I bought Simon and Garfunkel on a LP, and then it turned out to not be Simon and Garfunkel. You had to learn to read the fine print on the LP.
I don't know who that is.
Down to
yeah,
silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Oh yes, I do know that one. Okay, sorry, Shane, don't roast me in the chat. I just want to thank you all for your vulnerability there. It was awesome to hear, and a common thread among how people get into youth work, I feel, is like a crisis or something happening, or a life-changing event, whether it be a divorce or abuse or things at home, or prison, and or it involves someone else, someone coming into your life. And your article talked about, or a few of your articles talks about sort of that's where the crux of youth development happens. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So, and I mentioned to you this in your chat when I read through your articles that you wrote. Lloyd, you sort of talked about youth development, and Fiona, you started yours off talking about sort of what is a youth worker. And Anaru, you talked about the concept of relationship, and I thought it was a really good representation of sort of the who, the what, and the how, and kind of the why as well. We've just talked about the why. So we'll start with you, Fiona. I'm interested in asking you some questions about the piece of work you did around defining youth work. Your article is about how you define youth work, and you describe yourself as a sociologist at the heart of your youth work. Could you tell us more about what that means?
I think New Zealanders, and Aotearoa New Zealand is very good at bringing into the sector, and Lloyd, you talk about this in your article, but youth workers that have youth development at the heart of their practice. I'll be honest, I really don't. I have sociology at the heart of my practice. And why do I say that? Now, I don't say I'm throwing youth development out altogether, no. It's just, I'm thinking social justice, big picture, how do I make massive change? How do I see things just beyond that young person? To give a very quick example, when you asked how we got into youth work, and I said, look, you know, I'd come from an environment of abuse. Now, I could look at that and say, well, that was my mother and the environment that I lived in. But when I look at it from sociology, a sociological perspective, I'm going, what was the big picture around my mum? And what was the big picture of that period of time that all this happened? It was in 1980s, massive changes in New Zealand, huge upheaval. She had no social connections. It was the only answer. And in a way, having a bigger picture has enabled me to do something that's very hard to do, and that's forgive. Because I see a lot more to the story than just a broken mother. I see a broken system in a broken country.
Yeah, love that. I really love that. That's just something that stuck out to me when I read yours, just a different way of thinking. I think we talk about youth development a lot in the context of youth work, but I think there's a lot of different, I don't know what it's called, approaches that we can use and lenses that we can apply to our work. And in your article, you mentioned something that you described as controversial, that youth work is generational work, and youth work is actually about connecting generations. So I'd love for you to expand what you mean by that, and why would that be controversial?
I think I'd start with the controversial, but I think it's controversial to say today that the best person to be a youth worker is someone over the age of 60. Because often when we look at youth workers, we actually go, the younger the youth worker is, they understand the context and the life of the child, that time. And I'm like, yeah, but in traditional societies, even in European traditional societies, the person that would often be the youth worker were the kumatua, and they would be often imparting wisdom onto the rangatahi, taohi, the youth. And when I think about my story in my life, and I think, like I say in my article, who was the greatest youth worker? It was my grandfather. One of the things he used to do was take me for walks along the beaches around Kaiparahuarahi. And he was teaching me to look not for punamu, which sometimes washed up, but for coal. And he would speak to me how coal could speak to him. Now, he used to burn it on the fire, but he was looking for a particular type of coal. Now, you might be able to see this, but you might not be able to see this. So I think you can see my cup. There's a piece of coal there. And you'll see it's got little markings on it.
Yeah.
It's a piece of coal that my grandfather found on the beach. It spoke to him that it had a character that it wanted it to be drawn out, and he would carve it. Now, there's not many people that can carve coal today. And it would be people like my grandfather who would pull me under his wing and say, this is what to look for if you want a piece of coal that you can carve. And this is how you can carve it. So the wisdom would be imparted from him to me to then give to the next generation. And I often feel when I say it's controversial that we have taken a role out of society by often going youth workers are the best people when they are young. Or, you know, I think there's something's been taken away from the gem of what was once a position that our elderly had. And so I say, yeah, it's controversial, but if the mantle that was on my grandfather now has been given across generations, youth workers, that's such a powerful job. The mantle is so big. That's the challenge.
I definitely, something that stuck out to me, and why I definitely wanted to include that is this, is because I definitely felt challenged by that. And I was just saying to the others before you jumped in, definitely guilty of thinking, oh, I'm such a great youth worker because I'm young and relational and I can do a TikTok. But the older I get, the more I feel you accumulate, and the more you kind of drop some gems here and there, and you think, actually, I've probably got more to give now than I did 5 years ago when I started as a youth worker. And yeah, I just really appreciate that contribution.
And there's a reason why life, you know, that life gives you a story, so that you can pass on that story to someone else.
And I'd love to hear, Anaru and Lloyd, what your thoughts are on youth work as generational work.
I feel like my article kind of touches base on that, around how our kaumātua, our kuia, or those who have paved this youth sector for us are still so important in terms of the entire ngāhere, which is the youth sector. And I feel like no one or no age group is better equipped. I feel like it's all equal and we all have an equal role. But yeah, I can touch base on that more in my kōrero.
Awesome, thank you. Lloyd?
I live in a multi-generational house. So at 2 o'clock this morning, I was just sitting next to my moko, who was having trouble sleeping, and I didn't say much or do much. I just sat there and was there. I was being a koro. I was being a village, part of a village around that little 3-year-old kid. I think the bond between generations has been broken by society. Old people are being shipped off into homes where they've been entertained for the rest of their lives instead of having a purpose and a contribution to make. And by the way, we'll take all the equity in your house as well. And I kind of, that really pisses me off, to be honest, that bond of reliance and purpose between generations has been broken. So tautoko what you're saying, Fi. When I got my Korowai Tupu membership through yesterday, I just felt like I needed to say that during this kōrero.
That's a good plug.
When I filled in the application form, you needed to have a reference from a young person, and I was a little bit stuck. Oh, who am I going to ask? I mean, most of the young people I work with are about in their 40s and 50s now. But then I got hold of my nephew when he was born. my sister asked if I would be his godfather or mentor, and he's 16 now. And so I just emailed him, said, look, would you do me a reference? It's for us kind of a job thing. And he said, sure, uncle. And he sent one through. So that's the one that's on file at Ara Taiohi. And I reflected, what I was doing is youth work before it was called youth work, because that thing of mentoring a younger generation and looking out for them and being that person that you can go and have a chat to when you're grumpy with your parents and all that other stuff, or they're grumpy with you, is the stuff before it was called youth work and it was called being whānau, being hapori, or being a community together. And I think that a lot of kids in our country are growing up without that, and a lot of old people are just being entertained to death, and really the two could be much more meaningfully involved with each other.
Taylor, you're on mute.
I knew that was going to happen. Oh my God. Just off what you're saying, Lloyd. Have you come across any programs or anything out there that seeks to meaningfully build those connections within community between these generations?
Yeah, it's called whānau.
Yeah. We could be doing that a lot better. We have got a question in our chat. I'll put this out to anyone. Do you think that to continue to grow, you are always upskilling, not just in theory, but what are our taiohi at the time living and experiencing? So age then is not a barrier. Is it then about the heart of your youth work and moving fluidly through your own generation and those that go before you and after? Would anyone like to?
The short answer would be yes, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But added to that though is that at any period of time there's always a generation that, so you pick on that TikTok. Yes, we're all experiencing TikTok at the moment. How many of us have got TikTok accounts around our table at the moment? Exactly. So given Stephen, that divide means that is that tua kana taine sort of, and I talked to you about that yesterday, was, you know, the concept, and I do see it in some, and I said to you, so in some churches where they haven't made too much of a generational divide. Now that's not all churches, because a lot of churches will have different ministries with different age groups. But I have seen some places where they've intentionally had the elderly in the church connect with the young in the church, and the learning is going two-way. So it's living, not just living fluidly through your own generation, but living fluidly in the moment together.
Living fluidly in the moment together. I love that. Shannon, can you make a quote out of that and post that somewhere after this is over? Thank you. Awesome. Appreciate that kōrero around generational work as youth work. We'll move on to you, Anaru. So off the back of that kōrero we just had, you sort of talk about it in a different way in your article, but more through a lens of connectedness and the process of relationship. So can you describe how the concept of relationship defines youth work for you? And feel free to ask any questions in the chat, or jump in if you have anything to add at the end, Lloyd and Fiona.
Cool. So for me, I just want to go back to the reason why I came into youth work. And it really started because I built a relationship with myself. And I feel like that is the first step, understanding who you are, where you come from, in order to understand where you're going. And once I established the understanding of myself, I explored my own whakapapa. And so that meant exploring my maunga, exploring my awa, exploring the ngahere on my maunga, immersing into my awa. And every time that I connected to te taiao, it told me something different every single time. And there was this relationship that I was building with my maunga, my awa, my tupuna. And in this relationship, I started to not only better understand who I was, but I started to better understand the whakapapa in which I come from. And so when I started working with rangatahi, not only did I encourage them to explore who they were or where they came from, but I wanted to mimic the way that the taiao went in relationship with each other, with itself. So, for example, the ngāhere, when you walk into a ngāhere, what are some of the things you feel, some of the things you hear, some of the things that shifts your mauri? And it's the relationship, the symbiosis that is created when everything in the ngāhere is connected. And so I think about my mahi working with rangatahi, how can we be more like the ngāhere? So we are all equal parts to this sector. We all have a contribution. And if we were to take one away, the sector wouldn't actually exist. So if we look at the youth sector as the ngāhere, the rangatahi, our kaumātua, our kuia, those who shaped the sector, the youth workers, we all have an equal role. And it's not until we build a relationship with ourselves, with our young people, with the taiao around us, where we can actually better understand what it means to be connected to each other. And I can continue to kōrero about this for a long time. But before I do, I want to acknowledge the value of experience, and I did so in my article, the overcoming of adversity and challenge, just as Lloyd and Fiona have done, to help, plant these seeds within ourselves so that we can be pou for our rangatahi and for the youth sector. And secondly, I need to mihi to all of the people, places, maunga, awa, that has helped shape the whakaaro which I'm carrying, because I'm just going to be honest, this kōrero isn't mine. This kōrero comes from ngā atua, it comes from my awa, it comes from my maunga, and I'm just a mouthpiece, an extension of this mātauranga, of this whakaaro, this kōrero that I'm sharing today. But just encourage us all to go and connect to our whenua, to papatuanuku, to our maunga, to our awa, and man, it'll give you some beautiful whakaaro, just like Fiona's papa, how he was able to build this connection with the ko. So just encourage our whānau to go out there and connect.
Thank you. And the comment, people saying such a great way of explaining it. And the more I get on in my youth work career, understanding youth work and youth development in our sector as an ecosystem, and youth work, the biggest thing I'm picking up from you, this whole kōrero actually, is as youth work is a journey. And there seems to be this pivotal point when we came into it. We journey alongside our rangatahi, we journey alongside our colleagues, and we've got to learn more about ourselves to be able to, I guess, fill from a full cup, and that journey never ends.
And we all have like diverse lenses on how we view the youth sector, and no one's view is greater than the other. But what adds value to these many lenses is how they are woven together. And again, that's around relationship. How do we build relationship with those people who are around us, beside us, so that we can become a ngāhere, so we can support and awhi our rangatahi. But they too, the rangatahi, have an important role. And yes, Sai, we must sanitize after all of this connecting.
Kia ora, thank you. Lloyd, Fiona, do you have anything you want to add to that around the concept of the process of relationship and how we all weave together in our sector? I think he explained it pretty well. Thank you. So Lloyd, we'll move on to your article. In your article, you also talked about relationships, especially in the context of a youth development approach. The youth development approach can be a lot to get your head around, with so many models and frameworks that are out there. For someone starting out, if there's anyone new on our chat in our kōrero today, how would you summarise a youth development approach?
Thanks, Taylor. It's great watching all these comments come up the side. So can I ask a question to the people listening in? Before I talk about what youth development is, could you think about what it's not? If you were to pick one word that is the opposite of youth development, type it into the chat now.
There you go. It's a good one.
Go. See what else comes up. Undevelopment, great, thank you. I would pick the word intervention, and that's often part of government language, is funding interventions. The word intervention comes from a health or a medical model, I think, because it implies that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And that problem is usually in a person's behavior, you know, they're self-harming, or their needs, not in education, etc., or they're stealing stuff, or, you know, whatever. It's in their behavior. And so an intervention is something that's designed to fix behavior. I think that's the opposite of a youth development approach, because a youth development approach looks through what a person's doing and asks, what do they need? And a youth development approach seeks to respond to that need, recognizing that often our behavior comes out of our unmet needs.
Love that. Looking past, I guess, that tip of the iceberg, really, isn't it? Applying a lens to look at the needs. In your article, you talked about the active ingredient of connection and trust, and everyone needs connection and trust. And you talked about in your time you've seen stupid programs run phenomenally because they have the right active ingredient, responding to needs and connection and trust. And then you've seen amazing programs that seem flawless fail because they're run without the right people or the active ingredient. Do you think that's the difference between, do you think that's, you can have youth work without a youth development approach? I don't know if that's coming across how I intended the question to be, but.
You can deliver programs and services without a youth development approach, but they're only programs and services.
Thank you. Love that. And my next question for you on the youth development approach and Aotearoa specifically is you've talked about the rise of mana in youth development, especially in recent years through work by Ara Taiohi, Te Oroho, of course, the circle of courage to the circle of mana. And I feel like there's been some huge changes in the way that we talk and think about youth development, even in the last 3 to 4 years, that has made youth development, the way we view it now, quite unique to Aotearoa. For myself, I've been in the youth sector for about 8 years. And when I started, I was going to trainings on the PYDA and the 6 principles of youth development. And even the way our code of ethics has reshaped it and grown. I'm really keen to know your thoughts. You've had a lifetime of involvement in the youth sector here. So what do you think is next for the development of youth development in Aotearoa? We talk a lot about where youth development has come from and how it's unique to us now, but what do you think might be next for youth development?
Sure. By the way, those 6 principles are still good principles.
They are great principles.
They didn't stop being good for some reason. I think that what I see happening at the moment is we're reclaiming the story of this country. A lot of our models up until now have come from other parts of the world, and I like the circle of courage moving to the circle of mana. I think that our sector is growing in confidence to tell our own story, and I think there are 2 things that make our story unique in the world. One is our bicultural journey, and the other is the weaving of spirituality through our sector. Now, both of those things exist in other countries, obviously, but they exist in their own silos. And I think the future and the encouraging thing I see in the sector here is that people who are non-Māori are bothering to learn te reo. And people who may or may not have a faith are recognizing that spirituality is an essential part of who we are, and they're not putting it in a box saying that we can't touch that or talk about it. I don't see either of those things happening in other parts of the world. People tend to stay in their own groups. I think that this is something that we should continue to embrace, of sitting with people who are not like us. This country is small enough that you kind of have to talk to other people, whereas I think in bigger countries, you can just stay in your own bubble and never really interact beyond that. And I think that's a precious thing, and I think it's our way forward for the future, to keep talking to each other and keep learning from each other, even if, you know, we don't share exactly the same kaupapa on everything. Hope that's helpful.
Really helpful. Really helpful. And that last part made me think of what you touched on in your article, Anaru, around ako and reciprocal learning. And that's what we've been applying to get our youth development to where it is now. And that's kind of what you're talking about in terms to keep this development going. And I'm keen to put this exact same question to both of you. From where you're sitting, what do you think the future development of youth development looks like? Yeah.
Well, for me, I'm a product of a broken system, a system that has failed me in many ways and has failed many young people, many tangata, and many of my tupuna and my ancestors. And what has enabled shift in that space for healing, for growth, is the Indigenous lens, the revitalization of our pūrākau, of our stories, of our whakapapa, of our atua. And what I see in not just the youth sector, but across the system, is the revitalization of Indigenous stories, Indigenous practices. And I feel like, you know, our people are indigenizing these spaces because we need to reclaim mana motuhake and tino rangatiratanga, because, you know, our rangatahi need that in order to become, you know, who they are meant to be. And what I see is a lot of organizations trying to indigenize their space, but not having the proper tikanga and the proper awhi. So once again, going back to relationship, how do we, as tangata whenua, as you know, whānau of Aotearoa, Pākehā, Māori, Pacifica, and all other ethnicities, how do we create this ngāhere of relationships so that we can continue to indigenize these spaces and allow room for other cultures to add their stories in as well. So that's where I see the youth sector heading. And yeah, just want to mihi tua ngā kaihui whānau, because we are trying to indigenize the youth sector, our spaces as Māori. Kia ora.
Thank you. And that question you had at the end there, you know, how do we do this? How do we bring organisations along? How do we, and you provided the answer at the beginning, relationship and openness and connectedness and that reciprocal learning. Thank you. Fiona, we'll finish on you for that one.
Yes, finishing on the person who says she doesn't have youth development at the centre. My dream would be what Anaru has talked about, the indigenising of the space and the dismantling, because often, and why I say I'm a sociologist at heart is because sociology requires you to look at the space, the ngāhere completely. It then requires you to look at the whakapapa. And I have always, and people that know me know that I have a huge problem with Western theories when we keep them in the system because those theories themselves have a very dangerous whakawhaka. And the little glimmers of that continue to come up. And we see that with the way that our rangatahi, our Pacific young people, are personified in the media. So I have that type of dream. I also have the type of dream that actually says, is there a way of connecting generations that we already have? And one of them, believe it or not, I think that, and I've talked about this before in the sector, is we have an amazing early childhood curriculum. It's called Te Whāraki, and it is very indigenized in the way that it's conceptualized. And my dream is that we don't limit again to say, well, Te Whāraki is just for under fives. Even when the government was doing its update of the education strategy that actually goes from 0 to 200 years old, however old you can get now, I actually put a submission into the government to say, can we please use Te Whāraki as a lifelong approach? Because if you've got the whāraki woven correctly, you have the generations connected, and you have the ability to rewrite stories. And we've, what's really, and I'll finish on what Lloyd said, but what I am so honoured to be is alive at this point in time when things such as the history of Aotearoa New Zealand is going to be in our curriculum. It's been massive the last few weeks. Those who have been my students will know I have a big mihi, a big thanks to our Polynesian Panthers and what they have done and the pioneering work they did. And the fruition that's happening for a lot of those that have gone before us, a lot of our kamatua who have walked the streets crying out for change. We're starting to see the fruit of that change. So my dream is the same as Anaru's, an indigenising of our sector and a dismantling of the Western theories that we have relied on when we've been teaching youth development work.
Cool. I can't see into everyone else's computer screens, but I'm sure everyone in the chat is clicking along with me. And I feel like we came full circle there. Youth work is generational work to how we see the future of the development of our sector, and it's through a generational lens and re-indigenising our sector. Thank you so much, Fiona. Just noticed we have gone a little bit over time, and I've just got one little question to close off on a sort of light note. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. I feel so, as you're sharing, I'm trying to think, what can I say to this? I've got a question, and I actually found myself being so speechless and feeling really humbled to get to sit in this seat to have these discussions with you. And I'm sure the people watching this feel the same way. That was some really phenomenal kōrero. And thank you for all that you've brought to the sector over your journeys in it, and also what you're giving back to us now, because it's really valuable and you'll have a lot of wisdom to share. So thank you. One last question to finish off. What is your youth work superpower that you have developed over your career? Probably didn't need to ask this one, but I am really interested in knowing. And do you want to finish us up, Anaru, with what your youth work superpower is?
Before I close off with my superpower, I just want to share whakatauki. Ko au te kai whakauru ki te oranga o te ngāhere, ko koe te kai whakauru ki te oranga o te ngāhere. So I am a contributor to the life of the forest, and you are a contributor to the life of the same forest. And my superpower in the youth sector is being Māori. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Awesome. Fiona, any last words, comments, and what is your youth work superpower?
Just a big mihi to everyone, those in the panel and those that have come in online. My superpower is I'm a nerd, and I'm a nerd at heart. But the superpower that gets attached to that is something that people can Google afterwards. It's called double loop reasoning. It's a different type of reflection. doesn't just require you to go, what's happened in this situation and how can I change it? It actually requires you to go, how have I influenced this situation at this point in time and moment with who I am, culturally, gender, sexuality, everything. And it's an amazing ability to have, to double loop reason.
Thank you. Lloyd, any closing comments? What's your superpower?
Hey, thanks for doing a good job, Taylor. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in on this. To summarize my superpower, thank you.
And we have some awesome comments and thing in the chat. The best, I could keep listening all day. Epic. Someone's very new to the youth sector, feeling very inspired. So, and this is recorded so people can watch it back. So that's great. I was looking for a karakia or whakatauki to close this off, but I actually want to close with the punchline of Fiona's article. It was a really nice ending, and I think it'll be a great ending for us too. The ultimate youth worker is a treasure hunter, an adventurer, a boundary pusher, fire lighter, and light seeker. The ultimate youth worker does not limit this set of gifts, but uses them in their communities of influence to make a difference. Kia ora koutou ngā mihi, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much to our panellists as well. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Kia ora, Shannon here. We hope you enjoyed that Kōrero Café featuring 3 of the authors that have contributed to the latest Kaiparahuarahi defining youth work. You can purchase this issue and more at our website, www.arataiohi.org.nz/resources.